Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to Sema Africa, and now we have Voices of Food Future, a special series brought to you under Sema Africa, powered by Vice Versa Global. And today, we are talking about food systems and the cross-sectoral approach that we can have towards it. And no one else could we have this podcast with, especially for first episode, than Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, how are you?
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Karibu sana.
Santi sana.
Thank you. So please, if you can just tell the audience what you do, who you are, and introduce yourself.
Of course, thanks. So my name is Stephanie, and I'm the Global Youth Campaigns Coordinator at the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, also known as GAIN. So I support the activities of a youth-led movement called Act for Food. We have almost 30 youth leaders from around the world who are working on activities related to food systems. And prior to this, I did a bachelor in geography, and I have a master's in international development studies with a specialization in politics and governance, as well as sustainable development diplomacy.
When I grow up, I want to have all those accolades to my name. So Stephanie, when we talk of food systems, mostly people think of food, agriculture, the farming aspect of it, but there's so much more that comes into play because it's not just about growing the food, and there's a whole system that includes from the farm to the selling point to the table where people now get to consume food. So how important is it for us to look at all these sectors that are involved when you're talking about food systems from the starting point?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important because it is the only way that we are ever going to achieve real sustainable development.
Yeah.
If we want to actually reach the sustainable development goals, then we cannot work in silos. We have to work holistically. All these sectors influence each other. And even if you look at the food system itself, if you look at a map of food systems, it's not just farming and agriculture. There are so many different activities and people or groups of people, that are involved.
Yeah.
So we have governments, we have businesses, we have civil society organizations. And then these activities and people can influence or be influenced by, other factors like the environment, culture, trade, and so on. So yeah,
let's talk about the sectors you have been involved in, and how do they come together in this ecosystem of food, given the experience that you have amassed over the years. So how do you think urban planning, finances, even politics and governance, how does this all come into play when you're thinking about food?
Yeah, great question. So I think I'm best placed.
I love it when someone tells me great questions. It gives me confidence that I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, they're good questions. I'm loving it. So I think I'm best placed to talk about politics and governance because of my background. So first of all, with just, policies and regulations can shape our food system. So we can talk about, have in agriculture specifically, looking at subsidies for fertilizer or for seeds to make, agricultural production much cheaper. We can also talk about the policies that can influence the environment, regulations on how much water we use, whether we're in protected areas or not. And then another area of it is actually like investments. So governance can really, if we invest in let's say programs, so for school-going children to ensure that they have access to nutritious and healthy food, investments into innovation, research, crops that are can withstand climate change. And then lastly, and maybe most importantly, is power and influence and inclusivity. Can't speak. And, that can really impact which voices are being heard in the food system and in decision-making spaces. So, for example, youth or marginalized communities.
Let's. I love the fact that you've mentioned power and the young people. Honestly speaking, in our country, I'm picking my words very carefully. In our country, such issues like food, sustainability don't usually take the forefront when it comes to advocacy and also investment, like you've mentioned. And young people are not necessarily also involved. And unfortunately, we have had numerous cases of whether it's fake fertilizer or fertilizer being recalled and it's imported. So how do, first of all, young people play a role in this? And young people are diverse because we have young people who are farmers, we have young people who are policy makers, we have young people who also are lobbyists for these policies to be made. So how do young people come into play to ensure that all this comes to the forefront? And now when it comes to politics and governance, because you have had numerous occasions where you've participated in this, so how does that influence young people to play a part in this? Because I think we had an episode on Sema Africa where one of the young people who came was an advocate for young people in the United Nations, and one of the things he said was passing resolutions is one of the hardest things you can get committees, you can get organizations to do. So how do we make this work?
That's a big question. I'm like, where do we start? Like, we could be here for days. But I think
months, probably even.
Yeah, years.
It's a big conversation.
We will no longer be youth when we get there. But yeah, no, I definitely think youth are incredibly important in food systems. Like you said, we are absolutely everywhere. And also, you know, like you said, making it more contextual, within Kenya, within Africa, we make up majority of the population. So the decisions and, you know, the actions that we all take, not just youth, but like, you know, our governments or like in the international spaces like the UN, impact us very heavily. And if these decisions are made without us, then they are not for us because they do not include, our priorities. So I think just there's so many different ways that youth can be included, and that's something as well that we're trying to aim for at GAIN, is having meaningful engagement, having mechanisms that include youth, you know, meaningfully, and not just participation or tokenism. And that can cover so many different things. It's, you know, participation in these spaces, like you said, for the UN, and having access to that, because, you know, especially with rural youth, it is very difficult for them to enter these spaces to indicate what their priorities are, what the challenges they're facing. So that's just one of them, you know. And then also I think like capacity building, just ensuring that our young people really understand what is going on, what are our food system policies that currently exist, how are we impacted by them. So I think those are just like a few ways that we can. So
at GAIN, what specific activities do you guys do to make sure that you guys get this engagement? Because one of the things, for example, like Voices of Food Future podcast is one of those activities that you're just trying to bring this information to light and make it publicly accessible to everyone, and not just, you know, available to certain people, certain information, because there are nuggets that you give here that will be very important to someone who will use them later. So at your organization, how do you guys ensure that you engage young people, and what can maybe other people also make sure they do, or young people also do on their own? Because sometimes it's not just about waiting for someone to come find you. It's about also yourself, putting yourself forward to make
taking
sure that
action.
Exactly, and taking action precisely.
Yeah, no. So at GAIN, we're doing quite a lot. So youth is kind of seen in two different ways. One is a cross-cutting theme, because it should really be involved, you know, in everything that we do. So GAIN works to end malnutrition, and within that we have a range of like projects around the world. And so I think it's really important that, you know, we focus on youth, and we ensure, you know, because we have youth as its own program, but also just generally making sure that all of our projects ensure they incorporate youth. So that's kind of like one aspect. Then the other one, which is like where I work, which is in, you know, the actual youth teams, is directly working with young people. So my specific...
So you work directly with young people?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so the movement I work with is Act for Food. So they're a youth-led movement that actually came about in 2021 after the UNFSS. So we support like the youth leaders within this movement and the activities they do. So whether it's like, grants, or we have like a leadership program that they go through that gives them the skills and knowledge to, feel more confident engaging in this space.
Yeah.
And then GAIN also just generally has like the country version of that. So Act for Food is more global. And then GAIN has countries that they work in where, again, they work directly with young people. They, meet with them, they help them, they give them opportunities and push them to basically, carry out these innovative solutions within the food system, and take it to the next level of like, you've done this local work. How do we engage now with like policymakers, decision makers to ensure that these priorities and solutions are taken to the next level, which is like national or even global, for example.
So there is one thing about being a young person is not just, it's not just enough. You also need to be able to express yourself. You need to be knowledgeable in this. First of all, so that you're not misled. Secondly, so that you also know what conversations to put in, what doors to walk into. And that is part of what you guys do at Gain for Food and at Act for Food.
Yeah.
My bad.
Act
now,
for Food, yes.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. And this question is usually so much, it's in every sector, but specifically in food systems. In your opinion, what do you think is the biggest challenge that we have? I mean, I know there are several challenges and we can talk about, but what is the biggest challenge that you think we currently have in food systems that we really need to be addressed?
Yeah, I think...
What's like the one that keeps on rearing its head?
So many. But maybe I can, like, to narrow it down, keep it within, like, the theme of the podcast, which is, like, cross-sectoral approach to just, I don't know, sustainable development and everything. Is really, and this is again coming from my background, is policies. And I think this is another area that GAIN is working on, is just, how do we strengthen the nexus between nutrition and hunger with other sectors? So, for example, ecosystems, or like, climate, or maybe environment more broadly. And so that's something that we've been working on as well, is like looking at countries' policies, their NDCs, nationally determined contributions, to see, where do they say nutrition, where do they say climate, but then where do they say that together,
Let me stop you for a bit.
Nationally determined contributions.
Determined contributions.
Yeah.
So what are NDCs?
So it's basically, I hope I get this right.
Do it.
Yeah, maybe do a little Google, but also...
In your words.
It's basically how countries kind of set out their priorities, and they're measured. I will not give you a number because I don't want to get it wrong, but I think it's like every few years, they're reviewed to see that if countries are basically working towards these priorities. So they might say that we'll have like policies that include nutrition, and that it's like by 2030 nutrition, in
so
adolescence
like a trickle-down version
decreased.
of Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, now it's like more country-focused, country-specific. These are the this is what they're committing to, to do. So within these, like, we can see like where is nutrition being mentioned, where is climate being mentioned, the environment being mentioned. And really the reality is that if we want to accelerate, our sustainable development and make progress, especially, given our current situation where just that, climate change is still so, detrimental to our lives, to food systems, to all the sectors really. So doing this kind of research and looking at, these policies and seeing whether they work with each other rather than against is so important for us to make like substantial progress. And that's something as well that GAIN is looking at. It's called ICANN, in case you're interested. Have another Google. ICANN GAIN. Have a little read. But yeah.
You guys will have to Google a lot. Sorry. No, it's good because it's a wealth of information, and knowledge is power generally. 100%. So it's still good to have all this information.
Yeah.
So in determining these policies, that means there is a lot that goes into, first of all, coming up with a think tank to create these policies, and also pushing for these policies to be made, whether it's law or maybe to be made into a resolution. Is that process, how fruitful is that process? And just take us through the challenges of, first of all, doing that. And then you can imagine, say, for example, months of a lot of young people specifically just coming together, meetings, all this. And then now getting into another stage where it takes longer. Is this also one of the reasons why systems naturally, we're not, okay, food systems, yes, but all over the world, is this a reason why systems don't really work? Because of the time that it takes to pass something, even after lots of preparation? And also maybe, is there a time when you guys come up with policies and you're told, no, go do this again and again and again until you have it right?
Yeah, no, 100%. It can take incredibly long to get there. But even honestly, before even getting to that process is just having the meaningful engagement from the youth. Like getting into that space can be so tricky, and ensuring that we have representation.
The word meaningful engagement. Sorry to cut you short. Meaningful engagement, because it gives it a lot of meaning. Sorry to repeat the word again. It's not just engagement.
Yeah.
It's engagement that is said to have a purpose at the end of it all.
100%. And that's something I think that we're also trying to move forward in again, in Act for Food, is just, it's not tokenism. It's not very surface level participation. It needs to be meaningful for it to actually work and for youth to feel included. So like you said, with this process of, policies and laws, like it can take a while. And, for even youth to get into this space, it can already, we face so many challenges already. And, maybe to even kind of answer your question with an example. One of our youth leaders, he worked so incredibly hard on basically banning junk food advertisement in the UK to ensure that, when you come out of school, you're not just seeing a burger
every time.
Right in front of you. It's like, I know we've all seen those KFC billboards in Kenya, and you're seeing that chicken and you're like, you know what, maybe. But, so our youth leader worked incredibly hard, and he basically got to having junk food banned, but then the government changed, and I think they basically are trying to reverse it. So it's after all of that, it's now being reversed. And it happens as well with even school meals. I think that's as well something that happened in Kenya, and there was a milk program as well that we had implemented by one government, then taken out by another one.
So changing government is
it can be so much work, and then everything gets goes backwards basically, because another government comes in and then has completely different priorities, different ways of thinking, different things that they want to achieve. So
I don't know if you can use this example, or if we we have freedom of expression, right? Is it similar to free will? It's similar to what President Trump is doing with basically reversing government. Say something, resolutions that were passed by the Biden administration. And then Trump comes with a stroke of a pen, executive order number.
Removes everything.
Completely. And that brings you guys back to the drawing board.
Exactly. And now also, new ways of working with a new government and with different people. And I think that's also something that we try to, especially with the youth leaders we work with who are actively involved in this space, because not everyone needs to be actively involved. We have different strengths, and we should play to that. But for those who are actively involved, those who do want to be in these spaces, is learning as well how to engage with different kinds of people and work with different people, because, everyone is very important in this, whether it's governments, even the private sector, which is another area that, people have different opinions on. But, how do we talk to them? How do we make progress with these different kinds of people? It's a very important skill to have, I think.
So in your opinion, I have my own opinions, but I like to keep them to myself sometimes. How do you think to create a more resilient food system across all sectors? What do you think are some of the things that we are supposed to constantly keep doing? Because there's things we don't have power over, something like changing government. So that's not something we have control over. But what are some of the things that we can all do in our little spaces to build up to something that, will create a more resilient food system?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Again.
Again, you're coming in hot. I love it. I think we can look at this maybe from different levels. So I can start the individual level. And that is, as I said before, we don't all have to be actively in certain spaces, but just taking some time to really learn and understand and read up on maybe policies that impact you, and, understanding our food system and how it works. And like you said at the start, it's not just farming or agriculture. Consumer demand can really drive changes in the food system by, just changing what you buy, what you consume. And I think it's really important, especially in this day and age where I feel that a lot of people, especially maybe in the global north, not the nicest way to put it, or the West, don't really have the same connections to their food. They see it in a supermarket and kind of forget, like, where did this food actually come from? Where was it grown? So I think just taking that time to really understand and learn how our food systems work and how we can also, play a role in it as our consumers. With businesses, I think something that can be done is just, with corporate social responsibility, making sure that that's not just surface level and it's actually impactful. It's actually, private sector is included and incorporated into these discussions, because they are incredibly important. They play an incredibly important role in transforming food systems. And so they shouldn't be left out of the conversation, we should include them as well. And then again, with governments, we've kind of already discussed it. And like you said, we can't, they'll change and they'll have different opinions and priorities.
Yeah, we can't change that.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we can still definitely work with them to ensure that, certain policies we push for them, or, even having something like youth advisory boards across all like ministries and across governments to ensure that youth participation is included and is actually taken into consideration with our priorities. So yeah, I think there's like looking at it from scales, individuals and then moving up.
I like what you've grouped them into: individuals, governments, private companies. So are there some of these policies that you've worked on that are currently being enforced, or is there something that maybe Action for Food is doing that will eventually has the end goal of ensuring that food systems are sustainable for not just for us, because the most basic definition of sustainability is making sure that we use what we have today to ensure that tomorrow's generation has enough for them.
100%. I'm definitely going to use this time to promote Act for Food. Thank you so much. Here we go. So currently, what the youth leaders in Act for Food. Really. I'm going to add a little ad here. So what the Act for Food youth leaders are doing currently is we're working in 3 different areas, and these areas were chosen by the youth leaders. They were determined as what their current priorities are in their cohort. So we have the first one is school meals, which is basically just ensuring that school-going children have access to nutritious and healthy food. And there's multiple ways that they're doing this, which is kind of through like workshops. They have a podcast, actually.
Oh, really?
I'm gonna put that in there. I'm gonna plug that in. They have a podcast called Nutri Talks. And they also just released their first episode, which was really, really like lovely, and they did a fantastic job. So they're like, I think the really nice thing is in these different actions that they're doing, so we call them collective actions, is that there's a range of activities that are happening. So that's kind of what the school nutrition group is doing. Then we have the Indigenous food group, which is basically, pushing for Indigenous food to be incorporated more into food systems, just, having youth understanding what Indigenous foods exist, what are healthy foods, environmentally friendly Indigenous foods, and so on. So there have been some really interesting interviews going on in collaboration with GAIN, and also just generally working with like farmers and, local communities to really understand like what Indigenous food is here and what is healthy, what can be promoted, rather than just importing food that's not necessarily healthy for you and not, good for you and environmentally friendly as well. Then we have the role of multinational corporations in transforming food systems. And this is a lot more like advocacy work and working at events to ensure that, I think the most common one is like junk food advertising, to ensure that especially maybe near schools, we don't have, these billboards showing these unhealthy foods when children are like coming out, because it can really, impact our health. And impact like their views, and, you come out and like, that's the first thing you see. You're like,
subtly, but it still has a big impact.
100%. It's kind of like psychology, which I'll not get into because that's not my thing, but it definitely plays a part.
So, okay. Do you think in Kenya we'll get to a point where we'll get to push for something like your friend did in the United Kingdom, where he got junk food advertisements, mostly, of course, maybe close to schools or churches, where children who are more frequent, because I get what you're saying, psychology, because it's a matter of you understand your client, and if your client is a child, then the child will obviously get the guardian or the parent or whoever is with them to buy them that product. So do you think in Kenya we'll get to a point where we can have such resolutions that are so strict, and to just make sure that we also promote indigenous food, because we don't advertise the nutritional values of our indigenous foods that we have in the country.
Yeah.
And there's so much, but you only get that normally when you go up country to your grandmother. And she's like, oh yeah, you can actually cook this in like 5 different ways.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh wow. Because in the city, we don't really have, unless you really have the curiosity to actually learn about it. Do you think in Kenya we'll get to a point where we can have that?
I definitely think so. I think we are working towards it. And I think maybe it's just the space that I'm in, but I'm seeing people, working towards that. Like at Gain, we have the Vegetables for All campaign, which we're encouraging Kenyans to just eat more vegetables.
Eat your vegetables, guys. Eat your vegetables.
Exactly. And then we also have something called the Food Culture Alliance, which is really, teaching people about their culture and their indigenous foods, and how we can incorporate it, like beans, which are, so healthy. But I think most people would probably not go to beans as their immediate source.
Proteins in primary school.
Yeah.
That's unless we like go into the internet and you're like you're saying, Google it. And then you're like, oh, it also has this nutritional value. We don't know much about them anyway.
Exactly. And sometimes they're also just, not marketed, I guess, as being tasty. Like, you kind of see beans, you're not really like, oh, that sounds delicious. So I think another part of it is trying to make these things look attractive, like what are recipes that we can do that incorporate beans that are still healthy, but just makes it taste better and, actually encourages people to make these healthy meals. So I definitely think we'll get there, but I think it's always a work in progress, and it means that we just have to keep pushing. I definitely think we could get there.
Okay,
be positive.
Fun question.
Cool.
Every person I meet says that Njahe is not real foods. So I'm doing this just for all the doubters. Do you think, first of all, that Njahe is good for consumption? Secondly, because I have so many friends who always say they will not eat it. What is your opinion about Njahe specifically? I'm
a little creeped out that you've asked me this, because I actually eat jahes in the office like all the time.
Really?
I love jahes. So I'm Kikuyu.
Okay.
So maybe that's like self-explanatory.
Explains why.
Yeah,
but
everyone's like, oh, that
also
makes sense.
Kikuyu who do not love it at all.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I love it. Maybe it's the way like my auntie makes it, because it's so sweet and like I love it. But yeah, that's why I'm kind of like, oh, you've been watching me in the office. Because I actually eat it like all the time.
So jahe is good.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's the way you make it and the different like ingredients in it. I think it is like generally healthy. And maybe that's also kind of touching on what I just said before, is like just the way we cook things. Like you can always alter it to make it a bit more, like healthier.
Yeah.
So I think jahes are the same. If you're using like banana, like sweet potato, and incorporating that in, which you can with like a lot of foods, mixing those main ingredients in, then you can make it quite healthy. But I'm a jahe lover. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm a supporter.
Now you're not hearing it from me. You're hearing it from a food systems expert. That's not me. So Stephanie, let's talk about if we were to sit down today and recreate the food system from scratch.
Yeah.
How the whole ecosystem works. What would be the priorities that we would have that currently are taking a backseat because of how it is right now in the world?
Yeah. So I would start off, I think, with just having sustainable agricultural practices that are incorporating indigenous knowledge, that are environmentally friendly, and that also focus and prioritize the smallholder farmer. I think that's kind of the first area to cover. Second of all,
so
I think
about the small scale farmer.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Local food, supporting your local farmers markets, I think is very, very important. Second of all is also just accessibility and affordability, which is another like key area. And it's something as, I don't want to say as simple, but as just having school going children being able to have healthy and nutritious meals when they're at school, which is so incredibly important for your learning. Like, it makes such an impact on your ability to concentrate and to actually partake in your school activities. And then I think last of all, and I've touched a lot about this, but it's just like policies that just support, there are frameworks that support the actions that we want to take, that we want to implement. So just having policies that support these ideas and that, back them basically is also, I would say, like maybe the last priority area for me.
All right, there's something that's come up in my mind as you're answering that question. And I have to ask this question because we usually just have it as an informal conversation with most of my friends.
Okay.
Why is healthier food more expensive? Why is it always that food that is healthy is more expensive than food that is, manufactured, for lack of a better word, or junk food? Because you find it's more expensive to eat healthy, especially in Nairobi and in other cities. I mean, juice, like natural fruit juice, is expensive than soda. So how can you help us make that make sense?
I'll do my best.
And then considering that, I mean, we have plenty of fruits in the whole country. We have plenty of fruits. So how does it happen? We literally have a whole, it's more than 100 acres in Moya where they grow rice, but rice in the supermarket is going to be more expensive. Or like, why is healthier food more expensive?
Yeah, it is a good question.
It is. And it's good because I've remembered it and I've always wanted to ask that question to someone who actually would answer it from, not the perspective of, make the companies more easier than, operating it from the whole. So why is it more expensive?
Yeah, so from my kind of understanding of it, I think that just the way that healthier food is produced is just sometimes more expensive with just what's available. And, when it's marketed, it's more sustainable, then it gets higher price. So even when I lived in the Netherlands, they really tried to avoid eating meat. But the, alternatives to meat were incredibly expensive. Wow. So I think it's just the way that food is produced means that it comes out as way more expensive, and at least in that kind of sense. And I think also just generally this is also from maybe my own background and understanding is just, external factors that influence food prices. We're talking about cross-sectoral things and the climate and how it can impact us and the environment and how it impacts food systems. It can really impact the price of food. And that means even something like you said, like rice can go up, even though it's something that is very readily available. And produced. And I think that's just it's a tricky question.
It is,
that I'm trying to
because it's very, you can try and look at it from so many perspectives, but it's still land at the same thing. You can have a healthy product and a not so healthy product on the other hand, and one is cheaper than the other, even in the supermarkets. And then it's always something that's bugging my mind personally. This is just a question that I had to ask, but thank you for giving us perspective on that. When we talk of how and this is just now your own perspective, because we wanted to look at how multiple sectors can come into play. We wouldn't exhaust, I don't feel we would fully exhaust this if we didn't look at the role that tech is playing in this whole ecosystem, especially with the modern growth of how technology is growing exponentially. So right from farming methods to advertising to manufacturing, how much impact do you think it has had? And from your own perspective, do you think it's good impact? Does the good outweigh the bad? Or does this make things, harder? Do we jump from the frying pan into the fire, given the role that technology has played over the years? Because, let me not let me not ask and answer the question. So, how much of a role do you think tech has played in just the whole ecosystem, right from the farm to bringing the food to our tables?
Yeah, no, I think it's made an enormous impact in just accessibility and having people being able to access more within that entire system. So whether you're a farmer who wants to know more about, you know, different seeds and so on, you're actually able to just access that through technology and through your phone. And even on the other side of it, and I actually wanted to share an example of a kind of innovative app that came about. So I was at a health conference in Nairobi, I think sometime last year. And it was a health conference, but of course, you know, nutrition plays into it. And I think health and the food system is another one that,
they go hand in hand.
Yeah, exactly. So I went to this conference and it was really interesting. There were so many people having so many different types of like technologies and things that they were doing. And this one lady in particular stood out to me, and she had developed an app basically that, you know, if you have a child who is sick, you could go on this app and basically say, like, these are the symptoms my child is experiencing. Like, what do I do and how do I go about it? And, you know, it would have different scales, like, oh, you know, your child has this, most likely these are the things that you should do to help it, him or her. And, you know, if there was maybe something more serious, then you should definitely go to a doctor.
The kind that Google gives you, you know, Google gives you absurd results.
Yeah, exactly. Suddenly you're dying and you have cancer for like 5 years. Like, so exactly. So this was just, you know, able to help, you know, guardians, parents to, you know, without taking their child all the way to hospital, especially if it's not, you know, close to you. And then you're taking your child all the way there just to be told they just have a cold, do this and this. So I found this really interesting, and I got talking to her, and basically kind of her next steps, and this is again, you know, that cross-sectoral thinking, was working with nutritionists so that, you know, you could even have this like pre-illness care almost, you know, and like, you know, these are the things that you should just be having generally to keep your child nutritious. And then afterwards, like, you know, if your child is sick and maybe they have a cold or a sore throat, these alongside medicine, these are the things that you can also do. Yeah, to like help your child along and like take. And like, as someone who grew up with like a mom who gave her turmeric every single time she was sick, yeah, it's like, it's a good way to help and have a more like, you know, balanced between medicine and more like natural kind of solutions. And also just ensuring that you are having, you know, nutritious food that can help you to make sure that you're not sick. So yeah, basically, I think this was just a fantastic way that technology has really opened up avenues for collaboration between sectors and to really help people who might not have as much access, you know, or even like insurance to take their kids to hospital to really help them and, you know, understand what's wrong with them. So yeah.
I have an idea. How about we had an app that connects people, final consumers, with the farmers. So if I wanted arrowroots, just get them directly from the app. Okay, I don't know how successful that would be because of all the...
No, I see where you're going. It's okay. Maybe flesh it out a bit more, but like you're you'll get there.
But if we had that would be amazing. I mean, the same way we have, I don't want to mention companies, but the same way you have, I can order something like pizza.
Food delivery.
Exactly. If I had food delivery, let me also have raw food delivery from like the farm itself, and then it comes all the way delivered to my house. That's actually a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
Innovativeness.
No, I like it.
What role do you think the young people are supposed to play in this whole... Because you said not everyone needs to be an active participant. Not everyone needs to be making the policies. Not everyone needs to be lobbying. Not everyone needs to be doing all this. But when it comes to now collectively, as young people, talk to the young person who honestly doesn't... whatever I eat, man, I'm good. You know, like this doesn't really come to them. And mostly we are just told in a scary way, we are told, you know, mind what you're eating because at 40 you'll be dealing with so many illnesses and all that. But how
like
do
a scare?
Exactly, like a scare. And then like I recently saw a list of tests that you're supposed to do when you're in your 20s, and then other tests that you're supposed to do in your 30s and 40s and 50s. I'm like, do you expect me to get sick? Like, why do I need to do all this? But when it comes to the role that young people now play collectively, how do you think even the most... even the young person who doesn't necessarily work or just do work related to the food systems, what role can they play in just, you know, ensuring that they, whether knowingly or unknowingly, just play a part in all this?
Yeah. I definitely think, I know you said it was kind of like a health scare, but you know, when you hit a certain age, your metabolism slows down. those chips get to you. I can attest to that. I can attest.
They do get to you.
Yeah, things slow down considerably.
Start eating more vegetables.
Yeah, exactly.
And drinking more water.
Yes, honestly, there's just start there. Don't think too hard. Just start off with some water and some vegetables.
Yeah.
But I
and
also
jahe.
think and jahe. Jahe supporter for life. Put that on a t-shirt. I think maybe outside of like the health scares is just kind of also understanding, like I said earlier, is just our food systems and where your food is coming from. And you know how it's getting to your plate, like really, like when you're going shopping, you know, and you're going into the supermarket and you're looking around and just really understanding like with what it took for the food to get to where it is, you know, like, is this something, are you supporting, you know, maybe even like local farmers? Are you supporting food that's been imported? And these are just things, you know, I think because, you know, we'll just go in the supermarket, everyone goes shops for themselves. And like, that's just a very basic way to start and to understand without immersing yourself so fully into the food system. Just really understanding like where your food is coming from, you know, does it have like pesticides or, you know, natural fertilizer, kind of just having that understanding. And then also contributing to the health scale of just eat your vegetables and your fruits, but also eating fruits and vegetables that are, you know, sustainably made, that don't have all of these like, you know, kind of pesticides and things like that, the chemicals, that's the word I was looking for, chemicals on them, you know. And I think just, you know, outside of that is just, having that understanding. Like, I think honestly, health is just, it is really important as much as like we can laugh, but being able to fully kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just be an active participant in society, ensuring that you are just being the healthiest version of yourself and like taking care of yourself and being able to like access that if you are privileged enough to do so, you know, and really making sure you're going through it, like you're going about it like that, you know, just that it's fruits, vegetables, you know, healthy lean meats.
Jahiz. Right. Thank you so much, Stephanie. As we are approaching the end of the episode, I want to ask you one question that is, after all we've spoken about, if there is one thing you'd want our listeners and our watchers to take away and not forget about the whole food system thing, what is the one thing that you wouldn't want them to forget?
So many.
It's more like
the whole episode.
After listening to the whole thing, but like, what would be if? And I know this is a difficult question given everything that we've touched on, but if you were to give a parting shot, what would you say?
You
can take your time.
Thank you.
No pressure.
No, I'm trying to think of like, you know, the audience, like who is listening, and it could be absolutely anyone. So I don't want to say like go and make a policy because that might not relate to everyone out there.
People queuing at Parliament buildings.
I mean, well,
you'd
maybe.
like
That might be helpful, but I'm trying to think of, you know, if it's just a listener who's out there, you know, maybe you're listening to this while you're cooking dinner or, you know, you're driving to work or whatever it is that you're up to. It's just maybe, like I said just now, taking a little bit of time to really understand the food system. Like I said, you don't have to be active in it. You don't have to be lobbying in it, but just understand, you know, how does my food get to my plate and how can I as a consumer, you know, be helping to change and influence just simply by, you know, purchasing something where possible that is healthier, you know, that contributes to your health, to your ability to be the best version of yourself, you know, and even if it's buying beans and jahiz, then so be it.
Jahe wins again.
It will come back. I cannot believe you even said that. Like, I was just laughing so hard. I was like, he's coached me. I'm like, who in my office has snaked me that I eat jahiz like all the time? The betrayal is real, but
Be your own.
Be your own people sometimes. So I think that would be my takeaway, is just really understand the food system, understand where your food's coming from, and, you know, do it for yourself and even for that local farmer. Support, you know, your farmers markets, and understanding that that whole system.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for coming on. We've had an amazing conversation. I think before you let you go, I'd like you to just tell our audience about how they can get in touch with what you do, if people would like to participate more, if you guys are willing to also, have on more volunteers.
Yeah,
so
sure.
You have your camera. So this is now the other time that you get to market.
Yeah. No, I'm here for it.
Exactly. Just tell people how they can also reach you on social media if they want to get in touch and if they want to be, a part of the whole change process. So how can they do that?
No, that's fantastic. So I definitely think that, social media is one of the best ways because that is where we're really active. It's also where like a lot of young people are. So Act for Food is ACT, ACT, and then the number 4, and then food, FOOD. So Act for Food. Don't know why I spelled that, but just in case. So you can like look us up on, we have Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and that's really where we post all of our different activities and how you can also get involved because we have youth leaders basically. We have, I think, roughly 27 youth leaders. So in these countries, they are carrying out activities. And if you want to get involved, like you can certainly reach out to us. And even if we don't have youth leaders in your specific country, there's still so many avenues for us to collaborate. And even for GAIN, so Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, they have some fantastic opportunities that come up. They definitely really consider youth and try to take it to the next level, not just, like I said, that participation. So even reaching out and following GAIN and making sure you're just staying up to date with like what they're up to can really help collaborate. And then for me, I think my name will be put in the description because I'm not sure if people will remember how to spell it, but it's Stephanie Sargeant, and you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or Instagram. And I'm also, here to foster that collaboration and engagement and just really, connect with people. So, yeah.
All right. Amazing. We have come to the end of the episode. This was our first episode of the special edition Voices of Food Future podcast, which is under SEMA Africa, Africa with a K, powered by Vice Versa Global. On the next episode, we will be talking about who controls our food. We can't talk about the systems if you don't know who really holds the power. So tune in for our next episode. Remember, you can stream our episodes wherever you stream your podcast from. That's Spotify, Amazon Podcast, Apple Podcast. We'll also be available on YouTube. So be sure to visit YouTube, visit our pages, visit us on Vice Versa Global across all social media platforms. Interact with us, leave a comment, say hi. Also, get to listen to this podcast. You have a lot of knowledge that we have just shared here. So you'll be missing out on a lot if you don't. All right, until next time, see you guys. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.